One-liner question answers. Doctrine of lapse and Lord Dalhousie. Q1. Who introduced the doctrine of lapse? A. Lord Dalhousie introduced the doctrine of lapse. Q2. What was the doctrine of lapse? A. It was a policy under which the British annexed princely states if the ruler died without a natural male heir. Q3. Which Governor-General is most associated with territorial annexations in India? A. Lord Dalhousie. Q4. When was the doctrine of lapse abolished? A. The doctrine of lapse was abolished in 1858 after the Revolt of 1857. Revolt of 1857 and Lord Canning. Q5. Who was the Governor-General during the Revolt of 1857? A. Lord Canning. Q6. Who became the first Viceroy of India? A. Lord Canning became the first Viceroy in 1858. Q7. Why is Lord Canning known as the first Viceroy? A. He became the first Viceroy after the transfer of power from the East India Company to the British Crown in 1858. Q8. Who fired the first shot of the Revolt of 1857 at Barakpur? A. Mangal Pandey. Q9. Where did Mangal Pandey revolt against the British? A. At Barakpur. Q10. Where did the Revolt of 1857 begin? A. The Revolt of 1857 began at Meerut on the 10th of May 1857. Indian Councils Act and IPC. Q11. Which act introduced the portfolio system in India? A. The Indian Councils Act 1861 introduced the portfolio system. Q12. During whose tenure was the Indian Councils Act 1861 passed? A. During the tenure of Lord Canning. Q13. What is the significance of the Indian Councils Act 1861? A. It introduced the portfolio system and initiated legislative decentralization. Q14. When was the Indian Penal Code enacted? A. The Indian Penal Code came into force in 1862. Q15. Who drafted the Indian Penal Code? A. Thomas Babington Macaulay drafted the Indian Penal Code. Tantia Tope. Q16. Which leader of the revolt of 1857 was betrayed by Mansingh? A. Tantia Tope was betrayed by Mansingh. Queen Victoria Proclamation and Government of India Act 1858. Q17. Which proclamation transferred the administration of India to the British Crown? A. Queen Victoria Proclamation. Q18. Which act ended the rule of the East India Company in India? A. The Government of India Act 1858. Q19. Did the East India Company continue its trade activities after 1858? A. No, the company ceased to have any administrative role. Its commercial functions had already ended earlier in 1833. Q20. What policy of territorial expansion was discontinued after 1858? A. The policy of annexation, including the doctrine of lapse, was discontinued. Q21. Which new office was created in Britain under the Government of India Act 1858? A. The Office of the Secretary of State for India. Q22. Which body assisted the Secretary of State for India? A. The Council of India. Subsidiary Alliance. Q23. Who introduced the Subsidiary Alliance system? A. Lord Wellesley. Q24. What was the main feature of the Subsidiary Alliance? A. Indian rulers had to maintain British troops and pay for their upkeep. Q25. What was the effect of the Subsidiary Alliance on Indian states? A. It curtailed the sovereignty of Indian rulers and increased British control. UPSC Modern History One-liner question answers, Charter Acts, Judicial Reforms, and Constitutional Developments. Regulating Act, 1773. Q1. Which act is regarded as the first step toward parliamentary control over the East India Company? A. The Regulating Act of 1773. Q2. Which office was created by the Regulating Act of 1773? A. The Office of the Governor-General of Bengal. Q3. Who was the first Governor-General of Bengal? A. Warren Hastings. Q4. Which court was established by the Regulating Act of 1773? A. The Supreme Court of Calcutta. Pitt's India Act, 1784. Q5. Which act introduced the system of dual control in India? A. The Pitt's India Act, 1784. Q6. Which body was created under Pitt's India Act, 1784? A. The Board of Control. Q7. What was the significance of Pitt's India Act, 1784? A. It established dual control between the Board of Control and the Court of Directors. Cornwallis and Civil Services. Q8. Who is known as the father of Indian civil services? A. Lord Cornwallis. Q9. What administrative reform is associated with Lord Cornwallis? A. He separated commercial functions from administrative functions and professionalized the civil services. Charter Acts. Q10. Which Charter Act ended the East India Company's trade monopoly with India except tea and trade with China? A. The Charter Act 1813. Q11. Which Charter Act made the Governor-General of Bengal the Governor-General of India? A. The Charter Act 1833. Q12. Who became the first Governor-General of India? A. Lord William Bentinck. Q13. Which Charter Act created the first Law Commission in India? A. The Charter Act 1833. Q14. Who was the chairman of the first Law Commission? A. Thomas Babington Macaulay. Q15. Which Charter Act introduced open competition for the Indian civil service? A. The Charter Act 1853. Fort William College. Q16. Which institution was established by Lord Wellesley in 1800 for training civil servants? A. Fort William College. Indian Penal Code. Q17. When was the Indian Penal Code enacted? A. The Indian Penal Code was enacted in 1860 and came into force in 1862. Indian Councils Act, 1861. Q18. Which act introduced the portfolio system and legislative decentralization? A. The Indian Councils Act, 1861. Q19. Which Indians were nominated to the Viceroy's Legislative Council under the Indian Councils Act, 1861? A. The Raja of Banaras, the Maharaja of Patiala, and Sir Dinkar Rao. Ilbert Bill, 1883. Q20. What was the objective of the Ilbert Bill? A. The Ilbert Bill controversy sought to allow Indian judges to try European offenders. Q21. During whose tenure was the Ilbert Bill introduced? A. During the tenure of Lord Ripon. Q22. Who introduced the Ilbert Bill? A. Courtney Ilbert. Indian Councils Act, 1892. Q23. Which act increased the number of additional members in legislative councils and introduced indirect elections? A. The Indian Councils Act, 1892. Indian Councils Act, 1909, Molly Minto reforms. Q24. Which act introduced separate electorates for Muslims? A. The Indian Councils Act, 1909. Q25. Who is known as the father of communal electorate in India? A. Lord Minto. Q26. Who was the first Indian appointed to the Viceroy's Executive Council? A. Satyendra Prasanna Sinha. UPSC Modern History One-liner question answers, moderates, Swadeshi movement, and national leaders. Warren Hastings and early developments. Q1. Who was the first Governor-General of Bengal? A. Warren Hastings served from 1772 to 1785. Q2. Which land revenue system was introduced by Warren Hastings? A. The quinquennial 5-year settlement was introduced by Warren Hastings. Q3. Which newspaper is known as the first printed newspaper in India? A. Hickey's Bengal Gazette. Indian Association. Q4. Who founded the Indian Association in 1876? A. Surendranath Banerjee and Anand Mohan Bose. Q5. What was the main objective of the Indian Association? A. To create strong public opinion and demand greater Indian representation, including in the British Parliament. Q6. Which organization later merged with the Indian National Congress? A. The Indian Association. Banking in India. Q7. Which was the first bank established in India? A. The Bank of Hindustan. Q8. Which was the first wholly Indian-owned joint stock bank? A. The Odd Commercial Bank. Lord Ripon and reforms. Q9. Which viceroy passed the Factory Act of 1881? A. Lord Ripon. Q10. What was the main objective of the Factory Act of 1881? A. To regulate child labor and improve working conditions in factories. Q11. Which controversial bill was introduced in 1883 to allow Indian judges to try Europeans? A. The Ilbert Bill controversy. Indian Parliamentary Committee. Q12. Who helped establish the Indian Parliamentary Committee in Britain? A. William Wedderburn and W. S. Kane. National Social Conference. Q13. Which organization functioned as the social reform wing of the Indian National Congress? A. The National Social Conference. Q14. Who founded the National Social Conference? A. Mahadev Govind Ranade and Raghunath Rao. Dadabhai Naoroji. Q15. Who is known as the Grand Old Man of India? A. Dadabhai Naoroji. Q16. Which book was written by Dadabhai Naoroji? A. Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. Q17. Which organization was founded by Dadabhai Naoroji in London? A. The East India Association. Partition of Bengal and Swadeshi movement. Q18. Who partitioned Bengal in 1905? A. Lord Curzon. Q19. Which movement arose in response to the partition of Bengal? A. The Swadeshi movement. Q20. Which proclamation annulled the partition of Bengal in 1911? A. The Delhi Darbar of 1911 proclamation of King George V. Q21. Which song was composed by Rabindranath Tagore during the anti-partition movement? A. Amar Sona Bangla. Q22. Which country adopted Amar Sona Bangla as its national anthem? A. Bangladesh. Rise of extremism. Q23. Which events contributed to the rise of extremism in Indian politics? A. The deportation of the Nattu brothers, imprisonment of Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and dissatisfaction with moderate methods. Q24. Which conference in 1906 saw police repression during the Swadeshi movement? A. The Barisal Conference. Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Q25. Who founded the Servants of India Society? A. Gopal Krishna Gokhale founded it in 1905. Q26. Who is regarded as the political guru of Mahatma Gandhi? A. Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Q27. Which honor was declined by Gopal Krishna Gokhale? A. He declined the offer of knighthood from the British government. UPSC Modern History One-Liner Question Answers 1906-1919. Badruddin Tayyibji in Early Congress. Q1. Who was the first Muslim president of the Indian National Congress? A. Badruddin Tayyibji, who presided over the Madras session of 1887. Q2. Who was the first Indian barrister to practice in the Bombay High Court? A. Badruddin Tayyibji. Aligarh Movement. Q3. Who was invited to become the principal of Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College at Aligarh? A. Theodore Beck. Q4. Which institution later became Aligarh Muslim University? A. The Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College. Surat Split, 1907. Q5. Which session of the Indian National Congress witnessed the split between moderates and extremists? A. The Surat Split. Q6. Who was the president of the Surat session of 1907? A. Rash Bihari Ghosh. Q7. Which leaders were associated with the extremist faction? A. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, and Bipin Chandra Pal. Revolutionary activities. Q8. Who threw the bomb at Muzaffarpur in 1908? A. Khudiram Bose and Prafulla Chaki. Q9. Which conspiracy case was associated with Arvindo Ghosh and Barindra Ghosh? A. The Alipur bomb case. Q10. Who led the Delhi Harding bomb case of 1912? A. Rash Bihari Bose. Q11. Which incident involved the Chapkar brothers in Pune? A. The assassination of W.C. Rand during the Plague administration in 1897. All India Muslim League. Q12. When was the All India Muslim League founded? A. The All India Muslim League was founded in 1906 at Dhaka. Q13. Who played a leading role in the foundation of the Muslim League? A. Aga Khan III and Nawab Khwaja Salimullah. Q14. Who headed the London branch of the Muslim League? A. Syed Amir Ali. Ghadar Party. Q15. When and where was the Ghadar Party founded? A. The Ghadar Party was founded in 1913 at San Francisco. Q16. Who founded the Ghadar Party? A. Lala Hardayal, along with Sohan Singh Bhatna. Women presidents of Inc. Q17. Who was the first woman president of the Indian National Congress? A. Annie Besant in 1917. Q18. Who was the first Indian woman president of the Indian National Congress? A. Sarojini Naidu in 1925. Home Rule Movement. Q19. Who launched the Home Rule Movement in Western India? A. Bal Gangadhar Tilak launched it in Maharashtra, Karnataka, and the central provinces. Q20. Who launched the Home Rule Movement in the rest of India? A. Annie Besant. Gandhi's early satyagrahas. Q21. When did Mahatma Gandhi return to India from South Africa? A. Mahatma Gandhi returned to India in January 1915. Q22. Which was Gandhi's first satyagraha in India? A. The Champaran Satyagraha in 1917. Q23. Who persuaded Gandhi to visit Champaran? A. Rajkumar Shukla. Q24. Which leaders assisted Gandhi in Champaran? A. Rajendra Prasad and J.B. Kripalani. Q25. Which movement marked Gandhi's first hunger strike in India? A. The Ahmedabad Mill Strike. Q26. Which was Gandhi's first mass all-India movement? A. The Rolet Satyagraha. Komagata Maru Incident. Q27. What was the Komagata Maru Incident? A. The Komagata Maru Incident involved Indian migrants aboard a Japanese ship denied entry into Canada. Q28. Where did the passengers clash with British authorities on return to India? A. At Baj Baj near Kolkata. UPSC Modern History One-Liner Question Answers 1916-1922. Rolet Act and Jallianwala Bagh. Q1. Which act empowered the government to detain people without trial for up to 2 years? A. The Rowlatt Act. Q2. Why was the Rowlatt Act passed? A. To suppress revolutionary and political activities without normal judicial safeguards. Q3. Which was Gandhi's first nationwide mass movement? A. The Rowlatt Satyagraha. Q4. Which organization was founded by Gandhi to oppose the Rowlatt Act? A. The Satyagraha Sabha. Q5. When did the Jallianwala Bagh massacre take place? A. On the 13th of April 1919. Q6. Where did the Jallianwala Bagh massacre occur? A. At Jallianwala Bagh in Amritsar. Q7. Who ordered the firing at Jallianwala Bagh? A. Reginald Dyer. Q8. Which commission was appointed to investigate the Jallianwala Bagh massacre? A. The Hunter Commission. Q9. Who renounced his knighthood in protest against the Jallianwala Bagh massacre? A. Rabindranath Tagore. Government of India Act 1919. Q10. Which reforms were implemented through the Government of India Act 1919? A. The Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. Q11. What system was introduced in the provinces by the Government of India Act 1919? A. The system of Dyaki. Q12. Which declaration promised gradual development of self-governing institutions in India? A. The August Declaration of 1917 made by Edwin Montagu. Q13. Who was the viceroy associated with the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms? A. Lord Chelmsford. Kheda and Ahmedabad movements. Q14. Which satyagraha was launched for remission of land revenue in Gujarat? A. The Kheda Satyagraha. Q15. Which leader emerged prominently from the Kheda Satyagraha? A. Vallabhbhai Patel. Q16. Which movement involved textile mill workers demanding a 35% wage increase? A. The Ahmedabad mill strike. Q17. Which labor organization was later established by Gandhi in Ahmedabad? A. The Ahmedabad Textile Labor Association. Peasant movements. Q18. Which organization was formed in 1918 to mobilize peasants in Uttar Pradesh? A. The UP Kisan Sabha. Q19. Who founded the UP Kisan Sabha? A. Gauri Shankar Mishra and Indra Narayan Dwivedi. Q20. Which leader supported the UP Kisan Sabha? A. Madan Mohan Malaviya. Lucknow Pact, 1916. Q21. Which agreement brought the Congress and the Muslim League together in 1916? A. The Lucknow Pact. Q22. What concession did Congress make under the Lucknow Pact? A. Congress accepted separate electorates and agreed to one-third Muslim representation in the central legislature. Khilafat and non-cooperation movement. Q23. Which issue became closely linked with the non-cooperation movement? A. The Khilafat movement. Q24. When was the non-cooperation movement launched? A. In August 1920. Q25. What were the immediate causes of the non-cooperation movement? A. The Punjab wrongs including Jallianwala Bagh and the Khilafat issue. Q26. Which leader first moved the demand for complete independence, Swaraj, at the Ahmedabad session in 1921? A. Hasrat Mohani. Q27. What new name was given to the All India Home Rule League in 1920? A. Swaraj Sabha. Q28. Which Irish theosophist and nationalist leader was associated with the Home Rule movement? A. Annie Besant. UPSC Modern History One-Liner Question Answers 1918-1936. Indian Liberal Federation. Q1. Which organization was formed by the moderates to support the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms? A. The Indian Liberal Federation. Q2. Who were prominent leaders of the Indian Liberal Federation? A. V.S. Srinivasa Sastry and M.R. Jayakar. Vallabhbhai Patel. Q3. Which major peasant movement was led by Vallabhbhai Patel under Gandhi's guidance? A. The Kheda Satyagraha. Q4. Which labor movement involved the Sarabhai family and Gandhi? A. The Ahmedabad mill strike. Simon Commission and Nehru Report. Q5. Why was the Simon Commission opposed in India? A. The Simon Commission had no Indian members. Q6. Which leader died after a lathi charge during protests against the Simon Commission? A. Lala Lajpat Rai. Q7. Who chaired the committee that prepared the Nehru Report? A. Motilal Nehru. Q8. In response to whose challenge was the Nehru Report prepared? A. Lord Birkenhead. Q9. What constitutional status did the Nehru Report recommend for India? A. Dominion status. Q10. What type of electorate did the Nehru Report recommend? A. Joint electorates with reservation for minorities where necessary. Round Table Conferences 1931-932. Q11. How many round table conferences were held in London? A. 3. Q12. Which British Prime Minister presided over the round table conferences? A. Ramsay MacDonald. Q13. Which Viceroy signed the Gandhi-Irwin Pact before the second round table conference? A. Lord Irwin. Q14. Which Viceroy was in office during the second round table conference? A. Lord Willingdon. Q15. Which round table conference was attended by the Indian National Congress? A. Only the second round table conference 1931. Q16. Which new provinces were proposed during the round table discussions? A. Northwest Frontier Province was granted full provincial status and Sindh was separated from the Bombay Presidency. Communal Award and Pune Pact. Q17. Who announced the Communal Award in 1932? A. Ramsay MacDonald. Q18. Which communities were granted separate electorates under the Communal Award? A. Minorities, including the depressed classes. Q19. Which pact replaced separate electorates for the depressed classes but reserved seats in joint electorates? A. The Pune Pact. Q20. When was the Pune Pact signed? A. On the 24th of September 1932. Q21. Who were the principal signatories to the Pune Pact? A. Mahatma Gandhi and B.R. Ambedkar. Congress Socialist Party. Q22. Which group within the Congress advocated democratic socialism? A. The Congress Socialist Party. Q23. Who was the General Secretary of the Congress Socialist Party? A. Jayaprakash Narayan. Q24. Who was the first President of the Congress Socialist Party? A. Acharya Narendra Deva. Bombay Manifesto, 1936. Q25. What was the Bombay Manifesto of 1936? A statement by leading industrialists such as Purushottam Thakur Das, Ghanshyam Das Birla, and J.R.D. Tata criticizing socialist ideas. Delhi Proposals and Jinnah's 14 points. Q26. Which proposals were made by Muslim leaders in 1927 to seek a constitutional settlement? A. The Delhi Proposals. Q27. Which document was framed by Jinnah in response to the Nehru Report? A. Jinnah's 14 points. Q28. Why did younger Congress leaders oppose the Nehru Report? A. They wanted complete independence, Purna Swaraj, instead of dominion status. UPSC Modern History One-Liner Question Answers 1928-1935. Bardoli Satyagraha, 1928. Q1. Which movement was led by Vallabhbhai Patel against a 30% increase in land revenue? A. The Bardoli Satyagraha. Q2. Why was the Bardoli Satyagraha launched? A. It opposed a 30% increase in land revenue despite crop failure and economic hardship. Q3. Who conferred the title Sardar on Vallabhbhai Patel? A. The women of Bardoli conferred the title Sardar on Vallabhbhai Patel. Delhi Manifesto and Lahore Session. Q4. What was the purpose of the Delhi Manifesto of 1929? A. It outlined conditions under which the Congress would participate in the Round Table Conference. Q5. Who presided over the Lahore session of the Indian National Congress in 1929? A. Jawaharlal Nehru. Q6. What historic resolution was passed at the Lahore session of 1929? A. The resolution of Purna Swaraj Declaration. Q7. Which movement was launched to achieve Purna Swaraj? A. The Civil Disobedience Movement. Dandi March and Salt Satyagraha. Q8. How many demands were included in Gandhi's ultimatum to Lord Irwin before the Civil Disobedience Movement? A. 11 demands. Q9. From where to where did Gandhi undertake the Dandi March? A. From Sabarmati Ashram to Dandi. Q10. What law did Gandhi break at Dandi? A. The British Salt Laws. Q11. Who led the Salt March in Tamil Nadu? A. C. Rajagopalachari. Q12. Which activities were especially targeted during the Civil Disobedience Movement? A. Boycott of liquor shops, foreign cloth, and non-payment of taxes. Northwest Frontier Province and Khudai Khidmatgar. Q13. Who founded the Khudai Khidmatgar movement? A. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan. Q14. What was the Khudai Khidmatgar movement popularly known as? A. The Red Shirt Movement. Chittagong Armory Raid, 1930. Q15. Who led the Chittagong Armory Raid? A. Surya Sen. Q16. What was the objective of the Chittagong Armory Raid? A. To seize arms and disrupt British communication by cutting telephone and telegraph lines. Q17. Which woman revolutionary was associated with the Chittagong movement? A. Kalpana Datta and Preetilata Wardar. Government of India Act, 1919. Q18. Which act introduced Dyaki in the provinces? A. The Government of India Act, 1919. Q19. What were the two categories of provincial subjects under Dyaki? A. Reserved and transferred subjects. Q20. Which act introduced direct elections to the legislative councils? A. The Government of India Act, 1919. Government of India Act, 1935. Q21. Which act introduced provincial autonomy? A. The Government of India Act, 1935. Q22. Which act abolished Dyaki in the provinces? A. The Government of India Act, 1935. Q23. In which sphere did the Government of India Act, 1935 introduce Dyaki? A. At the centre, though it was never implemented. Q24. What federation was proposed by the Government of India Act, 1935? A. An all-India federation comprising British Indian provinces and princely states. Q25. Which constitutional feature introduced by the Government of India Act, 1935 later influenced the directive principles of state policy? A. The Instrument of Instructions. UPSC Modern History One-Liner Question Answers, 1773-1944. Regulating Act, 1773 and Pitt's India Act, 1784. Q1. Which act created the Office of Governor General of Bengal? A. The Regulating Act of 1773. Q2. Who was the first Governor General of Bengal? A. Warren Hastings. Q3. Which act introduced the system of dual control in India? A. The Pitt's India Act, 1784. Q4. Which two bodies shared authority under Pitt's India Act? A. The Court of Directors and the Board of Control. Charter Acts and Government of India Act, 1858. Q5. Which Charter Act made the Governor General of Bengal the Governor General of India? A. The Charter Act, 1833. Q6. Which Charter Act separated the legislative and executive functions of the Governor General's Council? A. The Charter Act, 1853. Q7. Which act transferred the administration of India from the East India Company to the British Crown? A. The Government of India Act, 1858. Q8. Who became the first Viceroy of India under the Government of India Act, 1858? A. Lord Canning. Q9. Which British authority replaced the Board of Control after 1858? A. The Secretary of State for India assisted by the Council of India. Indian Councils Acts. Q10. Which act nominated Indians as non-official members to the Viceroy's Legislative Council for the first time? A. The Indian Councils Act, 1861. Q11. Which act increased the number of additional members and introduced indirect elections? A. The Indian Councils Act, 1892. Q12. Which act is also known as the Morley-Minto Reforms? A. The Indian Councils Act, 1909. All India States People's Conference. Q13. Which organization coordinated Praja Mandal movements in princely states? A. The All India States People's Conference. Q14. When was the first session of the All India States People's Conference held? A. In December 1927 at Bombay. Q15. Which national leader later became associated with the All India States People's Conference? A. Jawaharlal Nehru. Forward Bloc. Q16. Who founded the Forward Bloc in 1939? A. Subhash Chandra Bose. Q17. Where was the first All India Conference of the Forward Bloc held? A. At Nagpur. Congress Ministries and World War II. Q18. Why did Congress Ministries resign in 1939? A. In protest against India being involved in World War II without consultation. August Offer, 1940. Q19. Which Viceroy announced the August Offer in 1940? A. Lord Linlithgow. Q20. What did the August Offer promise? A. Expansion of the Executive Council and the framing of a constitution after the war. Cripps Mission, 1942. Q21. Who headed the Cripps Mission to India? A. Stafford Cripps. Q22. Why did the Congress reject the Cripps proposals? A. They offered dominion status after the war and allowed provinces the option to secede. Quit India Movement, 1942. Q23. Which movement was launched after the failure of the Cripps Mission? A. The Quit India Movement. Q24. Which Viceroy described the Quit India Movement as the most serious rebellion since 1857? A. Lord Linlithgow. C. Rajagopalachari Formula, 1944. Q25. Which proposal attempted to break the constitutional deadlock between the Congress and the Muslim League? A. The C. Rajagopalachari Formula. Individual Satyagraha, 1940. Q26. Who was the first individual Satyagrahi? A. Vinoba Bhave. Q27. Who was the second individual Satyagrahi? A. Jawaharlal Nehru. Q28. Who was the third individual Satyagrahi? A. Brahmadat. UPSC Modern History One-Liner Question Answers, 1942-1947. Quit India Movement, 1942. Q1. Which movement was launched after the failure of the Cripps Mission? A. The Quit India Movement. Q2. When was the Quit India Movement launched? A. On the 8th of August 1942 at Bombay. Q3. What slogan was given by Mahatma Gandhi during the Quit India Movement? A. Mahatma Gandhi gave the slogan, do or die. Q4. Which student leader started the Underground Congress Radio during the Quit India Movement? A. Usha Mehta. Indian National Army, INA. Q5. Who first organized the Indian National Army? A. Mohan Singh. Q6. Who later reorganized and led the Indian National Army? A. Subhash Chandra Bose. Q7. What slogan was associated with Subhash Chandra Bose in the INA? A. Delhi Chalo. Wavell Plan and Simla Conference, 1945. Q8. Which plan proposed reconstitution of the Viceroy's Executive Council with equal representation of caste Hindus and Muslims? A. The Wavell Plan. Q9. Which conference was convened to discuss the Wavell Plan? A. The Simla Conference. Q10. Which Viceroy proposed the Wavell Plan? A. Lord Wavell. Cabinet Mission, 1946. Q11. Which mission was sent by the British government to negotiate the transfer of power to India? A. The Cabinet Mission. Q12. Who were the members of the Cabinet Mission? A. Patrick Lawrence, Stafford Cripps, and A.V. Alexander. Q13. Which British Prime Minister sent the Cabinet Mission? A. Clement Attlee. Q14. What was the main objective of the Cabinet Mission? A. To achieve a peaceful transfer of power while keeping India united. Constituent Assembly. Q15. Who first proposed the idea of a Constituent Assembly for India? A. M. N. Roy. Q16. Which plan accepted the formation of the Constituent Assembly? A. The Cabinet Mission Plan. Q17. How were members of the Constituent Assembly elected? A. Indirectly by the provincial legislative assemblies through the single transferable vote system. Q18. When did the Constituent Assembly first meet? A. On the 9th of December 1946. Q19. Who was the temporary chairman of the Constituent Assembly? A. Satchidananda Sinha. Q20. Who was elected as the permanent president of the Constituent Assembly? A. Rajendra Prasad. Q21. Who moved the objective resolution? A. Jawaharlal Nehru. Q22. Which part of the Constitution is based on the objective resolution? A. The preamble. Q23. Who served as vice president of the Constituent Assembly? A. H.C. Mukherjee. Important committees of the Constituent Assembly. Q24. Who was the chairman of the drafting committee? A. B.R. Ambedkar. Q25. Who chaired the Union Powers Committee and Union Constitution Committee? A. Jawaharlal Nehru. Q26. Who chaired the Advisory Committee on Fundamental Rights, Minorities and Tribal Areas? A. Vallabhbhai Patel. Interim Government, 1946. Q27. Who was the president of the interim government of 1946? A. Lord Wavell served as president, formal head. Q28. Who was the vice president of the interim government? A. Jawaharlal Nehru, who functioned as the de facto prime minister. UPSC Modern History 1-liner question answers, 1946 Education Reforms. Interim government, 1946. Q1. Who headed the interim government formed in 1946? A. Jawaharlal Nehru. Q2. Who served as the formal president of the interim government? A. Lord Wavell, later succeeded by Lord Mountbatten. Q3. Who held the food and agriculture portfolio in the interim government? A. Rajendra Prasad. Q4. Who was the finance member of the interim government? A. Liaquat Ali Khan. Royal Indian Navy Revolt, 1946. Q5. When did the Royal Indian Navy Revolt begin? A. On the 18th of February 1946. Q6. Which personnel initiated the Royal Indian Navy Revolt? A. Naval Ratings, non-commissioned sailors. Q7. Who were the prominent leaders of the Naval Central Strike Committee? A. M.S. Khan and Madan Singh. Q8. Which national leader played a key role in persuading the ratings to surrender? A. Vallabhbhai Patel. Partition and transfer of power. Q9. Who was the Congress president at the time of independence and partition? A. J.B. Kripalani. Q10. Which plan provided the framework for partition of India? A. The Mountbatten Plan. Important Congress sessions. Q11. Which session of the Indian National Congress was held in Bombay in 1885? A. The first session, presided over by Bomesh Chandra Banerjee. Q12. Which session adopted the resolution on Swaraj? A. The Calcutta session of the Indian National Congress 1906 under Dadabhai Naoroji. Q13. Which session adopted the resolution for complete independence, Purna Swaraj? A. The Lahore session of the Indian National Congress 1929 under Jawaharlal Nehru. Q14. Which session endorsed the Gandhi-Irwin Pact and adopted the resolution on fundamental rights and national economic program? A. The Karachi session of the Indian National Congress 1931 under Vallabhbhai Patel. Q15. Which session re-elected Subhash Chandra Bose as Congress president and led to the Tripuri crisis? A. The Tripuri session of the Indian National Congress 1939. Revolutionary organizations. Q16. Which revolutionary organization was associated with Bhagat Singh? A. The Hindustan Socialist Republican Association. Early educational institutions. Q17. Which institution was founded by Jonathan Duncan in Banaras in 1791? A. Sanskrit College, Varanasi. Q18. Which educational institution was founded by Warren Hastings in Calcutta in 1781? A. Calcutta Madrasa. Q19. Which institution was founded by Lord Wellesley in 1800? A. Fort William College. Q20. Who translated the Bhagavad Gita into English for the first time? A. Charles Wilkins. Q21. Which institution was established in Calcutta in 1817 to promote modern education? A. Hindu College. Q22. Who were the principal figures associated with the founding of Hindu College? A. David Hare, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and Radhakanta Dev. Charter Act and Educational Policy. Q23. Which Charter Act allocated 1 lakh rupees annually for education in India? A. The Charter Act 1813. Q24. Which body was established in 1823 to advise on educational policy? A. The General Committee of Public Instruction. Q25. What additional provision of the Charter Act 1813 aided educational development? A. It permitted Christian missionaries to work in India, promoting the spread of Western education. UPSC Modern History 1-liner question answers, education, economy, labor. Woods Dispatch and educational reforms. Q1. Which document is known as the Magna Carta of English education in India? A. The Woods Dispatch. Q2. What was the main objective of Woods Dispatch? A. To promote a systematic education system and spread Western knowledge in India. Q3. Which language did Woods Dispatch recommend for higher education? A. English. Q4. Which languages were recommended for primary education? A. Vernacular, regional, languages. Macaulay Minute and Bentinck Resolution. Q5. Who wrote the famous Minute on Education in 1835? A. Thomas Babington Macaulay. Q6. Which Governor General accepted Macaulay's recommendations? A. Lord William Bentinck. Q7. What controversy did Macaulay's Minute resolve? A. The Orientalist-Anglicist controversy. Gokhale and Sadler Commission. Q8. Which leader introduced a bill for free and compulsory primary education? A. Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Q9. Which commission recommended free and compulsory education for children aged 6 to 11 years? A. The Calcutta University Commission, Sadler Commission. Q10. Which commission recommended abolition of the intermediate course from universities? A. The Calcutta University Commission, Sadler Commission. Hunter Commission and Universities. Q11. Which commission was appointed in 1882 to review education in India? A. The Hunter Commission. Q12. What major recommendation did the Hunter Commission make regarding primary education? A. It recommended transferring responsibility for primary education to local bodies. Q13. Which were the first modern universities established in India in 1857? A. The University of Calcutta, University of Bombay, and University of Madras. Indigenous Education and Communications. Q14. Who prepared reports on indigenous education in Bengal and Bihar? A. William Adam. Q15. Where was the first electric telegraph line in India laid in 1851? A. Between Calcutta and Diamond Harbour. Economic and industrial developments. Q16. Where was India's first export processing zone established? A. At Kandla in 1965. Q17. Which early political association was founded by Dadabhai Naoroji in Bombay? A. The Bombay Association. National Education and Gandhi. Q18. Which nationalist leader founded the National College at Lahore? A. Lala Lajpat Rai. Q19. Which reformer founded the Satyashodhak Samaj? A. Jyotirao Phule. Q20. Which industrialist donated land for Gandhi's Sabarmati Ashram? A. Jamnalal Bajaj was a major supporter of Gandhi, though Sabarmati Ashram was established by Gandhi in Ahmedabad in 1917. Labour legislation. Q21. Which was the first Factory Act in India? A. The Factory Act 1881. Q22. Who is regarded as the pioneer of the Indian labour movement? A. Narayan Meghaji Lokhande. Q23. Which commission examined centre-state relations in British India? A. The Butler Committee. Q24. Which act of 1929 regulated industrial disputes and imposed restrictions on strikes? A. The Trade Disputes Act 1929. Imperial preference. Q25. What is meant by imperial preference? A. A system of granting tariff concessions and special trade privileges within the British Empire, especially to British goods. UPSC Modern History One-liner question answers, reform movements, associations, revolutionary organizations. Committees and economic concepts. Q1. Which committee was appointed in 1924 to review the working of Dyaki under the Government of India Act 1919? A. The Mundiman Committee. Q2. What are home charges in Dadabhai Naoroji's drain theory? A. Expenditures paid from Indian revenues to Britain, including India Office expenses in London, pensions of British officials, interest payments, and war expenditures abroad. Brahmo Samaj and Arya Samaj. Q3. Who founded the Brahmo Samaj? A. Raja Ram Mohan Roy. Q4. Which leaders were associated with the Brahmo Samaj? A. Debendranath Tagore and Keshab Chandra Sen. Q5. Who founded the Arya Samaj in 1875? A. Dayanand Saraswati. Q6. What was the slogan of the Arya Samaj? A. Back to the Vedas. Q7. Where was the headquarters of the Arya Samaj later shifted? A. From Bombay to Lahore. Women's education and social reform. Q8. Who founded the Bethune School in Calcutta in 1849? A. John Eliot Drinkwater Bethune, with strong support from Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Q9. Who was the first graduate of the University of Calcutta? A. Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay along with Jagannath Bose. Q10. Who founded the Sarva Seva Sangh to promote Sarvodaya? A. Vinoba Bhave. Fabianism. Q11. What is Fabianism? A. A gradualist socialist movement founded in London in 1884. Q12. Which leaders were associated with Fabian socialism? A. George Bernard Shaw, Sidney Webb, and Annie Besant. Early political associations. Q13. Which association was founded by Radhakanta Deb and Debendranath Tagore in 1851? A. The British Indian Association. Q14. Who founded the Indian Association in 1876? A. Surendranath Banerjee and Anand Mohan Bose. Q15. Which newspaper was associated with nationalist opinion in Bengal? A. The Hindu Patriot. Q16. Who founded the Madras Mahajana Sabha? A. M. Viraraghavacharya, G. Subramania Iyer, and P. Anandacharlu. Q17. Who founded the Madras Native Association? A. Gazulu Lakshminarasu Chetty. Revolutionary organizations. Q18. Who founded the Anushilan Samiti? A. Pramathanath Mitra. Q19. Which newspaper was associated with the Juventus Group? A. Juventus. Q20. Who founded Abhinav Bharat? A. Vinayak Damodar Savarkar and Ganesh Damodar Savarkar. Q21. What was the earlier name of Abhinav Bharat? A. Mitra Miller. Q22. Who founded the Home Rule Society in London? A. Shyamji Krishna Verma. Q23. Which organization was founded by Lala Lajpat Rai and Ajit Singh in Punjab? A. The Bharat Mata Society. Q24. Who assassinated Sir Curzon Wili in London in 1909? A. Madan Lal Dhinra. Q25. Which revolutionary organization was founded at Firoz Shah Kotla in 1928? A. The Hindustan Socialist Republican Association. Q26. Who were the principal leaders of the Lahore conspiracy case? A. Bhagat Singh, Rajguru, and Sukhdev Thapar. Q27. Which event is also known as the Kakori train robbery? A. The Kakori conspiracy. Q28. Which revolutionaries were executed in connection with the Kakori conspiracy? A. Ram Prasad Bismil, Ashfaqullah Khan, Roshan Singh, and Rajendra Lahiri. UPSC Modern History One-liner question answers, land revenue systems and peasant movements. Permanent settlement, 1793. Q1. Which land revenue system was introduced by Lord Cornwallis in Bengal in 1793? A. The permanent settlement. Q2. Who introduced the permanent settlement? A. Lord Cornwallis. Q3. Which company official had earlier proposed the permanent settlement? A. John Shaw. Q4. Which rights enabled the East India Company to collect revenue in Bengal? A. The Diwani rights. Q5. What was the main feature of the permanent settlement? A. Revenue demand was fixed permanently, and zamindars were recognized as proprietors of land. Q6. What was a major drawback of the permanent settlement? A. It led to increased litigation and exploitation of peasants by zamindars. Rayatwari settlement. Q7. Which land revenue system was introduced in South India by Thomas Munro and Alexander Reid? A. The Rayatwari system. Q8. Who were the principal architects of the Rayatwari system? A. Thomas Munro and Alexander Reid. Q9. What document was issued to cultivators under the Rayatwari system? A. Patta. Q10. Under the Rayatwari system, with whom did the government settle revenue directly? A. Individual cultivators, riots. Mahalwari settlement. Q11. Which land revenue system was introduced in northwestern provinces and parts of central India? A. The Mahalwari system. Q12. Who introduced the Mahalwari system? A. William Bentinck. Q13. What was the basic unit of assessment under the Mahalwari system? A. The village or mahal. Santhal Rebellion, 1855-56. Q14. Who led the Santhal Rebellion? A. Sidhu Murmu and Kanhu Murmu, along with Chand and Bhairav. Q15. What administrative unit was created after the Santhal Rebellion? A. Santhal Pargana. Q16. What legal protection was later provided to Santhals? A. Restrictions were imposed on the transfer of tribal land to non-Santhals. Sannyasi Rebellion and literary works. Q17. Which novel by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay is based on the Sannyasi Rebellion? A. Anandamath. Indigo Revolt, 1859-60. Q18. Which revolt was launched by peasants forced to cultivate indigo in Bengal? A. The Indigo Revolt. Q19. Who were prominent leaders of the Indigo Revolt? A. Digambar Bishwas and Bishnu Bishwas. Q20. Which play exposed the oppression of indigo cultivators? A. Neel Darpan by Dinabandhu Mitra. Pabna Agrarian Unrest, 1873-76. Q21. Which peasant movement in Bengal relied mainly on legal and peaceful methods against zamindars? A. The Pabna Agrarian Unrest. Deccan Riots, 1875. Q22. Which peasant uprising occurred in Maharashtra after a fall in cotton prices and high land revenue demands? A. The Deccan Riots. Q23. Which legislation followed the Deccan Riots? A. The Deccan Agriculturists Relief Act. Ekam Movement, 1921-22. Q24. In which districts of Uttar Pradesh did the Ekam Movement occur? A. Hardoi, Bahraich, and Sitapur. Q25. Who led the Ekam Movement? A. Madari Pasi. Q26. What was the main demand of the Ekam Movement? A. Reduction of rent and payment of only the recorded rent, often interpreted as resisting excessive exactions by landlords. UPSC Modern History One-liner question answers, important personalities and organizations. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan and Aligarh Movement. Q1. Who propounded the two-nation theory in its early form? A. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. Q2. Who founded the Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College at Aligarh in 1875? A. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. Q3. Which institution later became Aligarh Muslim University? A. The Mohammedan Anglo-Oriental College. Q4. Which title was conferred on Sir Syed Ahmad Khan by the British? A. Knight Commander of the Star of India, KCSI. Surendranath Banerjee and Indian Association. Q5. Who founded the Indian Association in 1876? A. Surendranath Banerjee and Anand Mohan Bose. Q6. Which newspaper was edited by Surendranath Banerjee? A. The Bengali. Dadabhai Naoroji. Q7. Who founded the East India Association in London in 1866? A. Dadabhai Naoroji. Q8. Who is known as the Grand Old Man of India? A. Dadabhai Naoroji. Q9. Which theory was propounded by Dadabhai Naoroji? A. The Drain Theory. Q10. Which book written by Dadabhai Naoroji explained the economic exploitation of India? A. Poverty and un-British rule in India. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Q11. Which reformer was instrumental in the enactment of the Hindu Widows Remarriage Act of 1856? A. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Q12. Which Bengali reformer campaigned against child marriage and for women's education? A. Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Thakkar Bapar and tribal welfare. Q13. Who was popularly known as Thakkar Bapar? A. Amritlal Vithaldas Thakkar. Q14. Which organization for tribal welfare was founded by Thakkar Bapar in 1922? A. The Bhil Seva Mandal. Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Q15. Who founded the Servants of India Society in 1905? A. Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Q16. Who is regarded as the political guru of Mahatma Gandhi? A. Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Q17. Which newspaper was associated with Gopal Krishna Gokhale? A. Sudharak. Lala Lajpat Rai. Q18. Which nationalist leader was known as the Punjab Kesari? A. Lala Lajpat Rai. Q19. Which book was written by Lala Lajpat Rai? A. England's Debt to India. Q20. Which leader founded the Indian Home Rule League of America in New York? A. Lala Lajpat Rai. M. N. Roy. Q21. Who founded the Radical Democratic Party? A. M. N. Roy. Q22. Which journal was published by M. N. Roy? A. Vanguard. Mahadev Govind Ranade. Q23. Who founded the Pune Sarvajanik Sabha? A. Mahadev Govind Ranade. Q24. Which newspaper was associated with Mahadev Govind Ranade? A. Indu Prakash. Ambedkar. Q25. Which political party was founded by B. R. Ambedkar in 1936? A. The Independent Labour Party. Q26. Which political party was founded by B. R. Ambedkar in 1942? A. The Scheduled Castes Federation. UPSC Modern History One-liner question answers, leaders, newspapers, books, cinema and culture. Surendranath Banerjee. Q1. Which nationalist leader was dismissed from the Indian Civil Service and later founded the Indian Association? A. Surendranath Banerjee. Q2. Which autobiography was written by Surendranath Banerjee? A. A Nation in Making. Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Q3. Who is known as the father of Indian unrest? A. Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Q4. Which educational society was co-founded by Tilak in 1884? A. The Deccan Education Society. Q5. Which newspapers were started by Tilak? A. Kesari and the Maharatta. Madam Vikaji Kama. Q6. Who is known as the mother of Indian Revolution? A. Vikaji Kama. Q7. Where did Madam Kama unfurl an early version of the Indian national flag in 1907? A. At the International Socialist Congress of Stuttgart 1907 in Stuttgart. J. B. Kripalani. Q8. Who founded the Kisan Mazdoor Praja Party? A. J. B. Kripalani. Q9. Which party later merged with the Kisan Mazdoor Praja Party to form the Praja Socialist Party? A. The Socialist Party. Maulana Abul Kalam Azad. Q10. Which newspaper was edited by Maulana Azad? A. Al Hilal. Dinabandhu Mitra. Q11. Which Bengali play exposed the oppression of indigo cultivators? A. Neel Darpan. Q12. Who wrote Neel Darpan? A. Dinabandhu Mitra. Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Q13. Who wrote Anandamath? A. Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. Q14. Which song from Anandamath became the national song of India? A. Vande Mataram. Q15. Which was Bankim Chandra's first major novel? A. Durgesh Nandini. Rabindranath Tagore. Q16. Who wrote the poem collection Gitanjali? A. Rabindranath Tagore. Gandhi and influential books. Q17. Which book by John Ruskin deeply influenced Mahatma Gandhi? A. Unto this last. Q18. Which Gujarati work did Gandhi write based on Ruskin's ideas? A. Sarvodaya. Q19. Which book contains Gandhi's political philosophy? A. Hind Swaraj. Arbindo Ghosh. Q20. Which newspaper was associated with Arbindo Ghosh? A. Band Mataram. Q21. Which book was written by Arbindo after turning to spiritual pursuits? A. The Life Divine. Subhash Chandra Bose. Q22. Which book was written by Subhash Chandra Bose? A. The Indian Struggle. Panchsheel. Q23. What are the Panchsheel principles? A. 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, mutual respect for sovereignty, non-aggression, non-interference, equality and mutual benefit, and peaceful coexistence. Q24. In which year were the Panchsheel principles adopted by India and China? A. 1954. Indian cinema milestones. Q25. Which was the first full-length Indian feature film? A. Raja Harishchandra by Dada Saheb Phalke. Q26. Which was India's first talkie film? A. Alam Ara. Q27. Which song from Alam Ara became India's first film song? A. Dada Kuda Ke Naam Par. Q28. Which was India's first indigenously processed color film? A. Kisan Kanya. Q29. Which Indian film won the Academy Award for Best Original Song? A. RRR. Q30. Which Indian film won an honorary Oscar for Satyajit Ray? A. His lifetime contribution to cinema was recognized with an honorary Academy Award in 1992.